From shadow to light, reclaiming your story. How changing your story changes everything. It sounds pretty far-fetched, doesn't it? Change your story, change your life. My first question when I heard this was, do I even have a story? And then I started listening to my thoughts, and they let me know my story. Before I knew my story, I thought I knew my capabilities and my limits. You know how you feel when your parents or teachers say, you can be anything you want to be, and you know that isn't true? We learn at an early age who we are and who we can be, because the world lets us know. We find out that we're the brain, or the good-looking one, or the class clown, or the jock, or the poet, or the screw-up, or the leader, or the follower. And we take in all that information, and they tell us a story about who we are, who we can be, and who we can't be. And if we don't bother listening to our thoughts and questioning them, that's who we end up becoming. When we have a traumatic experience, our brains become hyper-focused on fear and safety. When we have a lot of traumatic experiences or severe traumatic experiences, our brain structure changes and we become exclusively focused on fear and safety. When this happens in childhood, we develop a survival brain, and a survival brain makes it very difficult to learn. And then we think that we're not that smart, simply because we're trying to survive. Before we begin, we're going to cover some topics that hold the possibility of triggering us. So if you need to stop this and step away for a few minutes, please do. This is part 1, exploring the roles of stories within ourselves. Part 2 will be the influence of stigma and internal stories. Part 3 will be engaging with narrative techniques to build agency and heal trauma. And Part 4 will be implementing a new narrative in words and images. The objectives are to explore the role of stories in shaping our identities, analyze the influence of experience and reactions on self-talk, personal and family narratives, and then we'll engage in Part 3 with narrative therapy techniques to reauthor our self-image and heal trauma, and finally in Part 4 to implement a new narrative in words and images. Storytelling is actually a deep integrative process that pulls our bodies, our feelings, and all of our implicit memories into this larger frame where we're trying to make sense of a deep, experienced reality, according to Daniel Siegel. So who here likes a good story? Don't we all? Think for a moment about the countless stories you tell yourself each day. Not stories like Moby Dick or the Avengers, those grand external tales we all know, but the quiet, persistent stories running through our minds. Stories about how others perceive us and how we see them. Stories that define our limits and potentials. They're the narratives that label us as good at math or not a people person, a natural leader, or the quiet one. These stories shape everything from how we see ourselves to how we engage with the world. But where do these stories come from? Often they're shaped by past experiences, influenced by things people have said, or by cultural expectations. You might think of a time when someone told you, "You're always so responsible." Over time, you absorb that narrative, seeing yourself as the responsible one and making decisions based on that identity, sometimes even at the expense of your own needs. The stories we tell ourselves about our capabilities or limitations can be empowering, or they can be deeply limiting. Consider how often you think, "I'm just not good at that," or "That's not something someone like me would do." How many of these beliefs are based on past remarks or fears rather than true limitations? These self-imposed stories can act as invisible barriers, holding us back from new experiences or personal growth. Think of the stories you tell yourself in a day. And what if we could reauthor these stories? The narratives we carry aren't fixed truths, they're interpretations. By challenging these narratives, we can expand our sense of self and open doors to new possibilities. Instead of being the quiet one, maybe you could become the one who speaks up only when necessary. Instead of being not creative, you could realize your creativity in the way you live your life. We'll explore how to identify, understand, and reauthor the stories that define us. We'll look at the role of self-talk in shaping these stories and how experiences, particularly challenging ones, impact the narratives we carry. We'll also dive into techniques for reshaping self-limiting beliefs, drawing from narrative therapy, positive psychology, mindfulness, and self-compassion. By the end of this series, my hope is that each of us will begin to see our personal narratives not as fixed scripts, but as evolving stories that we have the power to reauthor. Imagine the freedom and growth possible when we take the pen back, consciously crafting an identity that empowers us, one that aligns with our true values, strengths, and potential. So let's go back to this morning. What was your first thought when you got out of bed? For many of us, it starts with, "I've got to. I've got to get the kids off to school. I've got to go to work. I've got to play this seminar. I've got to get out of bed." So here's a little secret. You don't gotta do nothing. There are likely to be consequences if you don't do some things, but you don't gotta do nothing. So what if your first thought in the morning was not about "I've got to," but about what you get to do? With this one small change, you're already changing your story, because now you're not just a character in your story, you're the author. So let's start by reflecting on this. What's one story you tell yourself daily that may not be entirely true? What might change if you allowed yourself to see it differently? As we move forward, please hold that question close and consider how the answers might open a door to a new chapter in your own life story. Stories you attribute to others while in traffic. Do you ever assume the reasons people cut you off in traffic, or wait too long in front of you in a turn lane and miss the turn? Do you assume they don't care about you, or they're not as smart as you, or do you think they think they're better than you? You might assume similar reasons when someone is late for a meeting. They may think they're more important than I am, or that they had more important things to do. Many of us are constantly making up reasons for other people's actions, when the truth is, we really don't know. But our brains don't like to not know things. That's part of why they make up stories. They make up stories so that they can test them like theories. And if they're true, our brains can use these stories to create rules to let them know what is and isn't safe. That's their main job. And there are stories you think others attribute to you while in traffic. If you're the first person in a turn lane to stop on a red or a yellow arrow after everyone in front of you has gone through the turn lane and there are still cars behind you, do you imagine them cursing you out? If you drop something and it makes a noise, do you imagine what others may be thinking? Can you read minds? Of course not. So why does this stuff keep popping up in our heads like an out-of-control popcorn machine? If our brains could talk directly to us, they might say something like, "Dude, I'm just trying to keep you safe." And you might say, "Brain, you trying to keep me safe is making me anxious." Perhaps it would answer, "Dude, you're supposed to be living in a tribe with a clear distinction between us and them, but you're living in the modern world, and there's not many of us, and there's a whole bunch of them, and it's hard for me to tell who's who." Why is it saying this stuff? It's because the structure of our brains was formed when we lived in tribes, when we knew everyone in our tribe, and we only had to distinguish our tribe from others, and then figure out if they were hostile or not. Watch the news, and it seems everyone is hostile. Our brains absorb that knowledge and use it to try and keep us safe, while most of our anxiety is through the roof. There are stories in our heads about others we see on the street. Do you make up stories about people you see on the street, or even people you know only casually, who may have lives you know little about? How detailed are some of these stories? Have you ever assumed certain things about casual acquaintances, and then discovered that the truth had little to do with your assumptions? Do you have stories in your head about how other people see you, people at work or school or even at home, the cashier at a store? So why do we tell stories? We tell stories because they lie at the heart of human connection. Stories help us to make sense of the world around us, conveying emotions and sharing experiences in ways that facts alone cannot. They create a bridge between us, sparking empathy by letting us step into someone else's shoes. Through storytelling, we explore complex ideas, cultural values, and reflect on social norms, preserving wisdom and traditions across generations. Do any of you have small children? What do they want at bedtime? A story, of course. Stories are essential tools for making sense of our lives. They allow us to capture the meaning of past experiences, encourage us to reflect and find purpose in what we've been through. Whether through myths, fables, or personal anecdotes, storytelling helps us navigate life's uncertainties and challenges by framing them in a structured, understandable way. Stories give us the language to process our journeys, turning complex events into something we can carry with us in our minds. Stories engage our minds, ignite our emotions, and spark our problem-solving abilities. They give us a framework to confront fears, explore aspirations, and wrestle with moral dilemmas within the safe spaces they create. Storytelling goes beyond mere entertainment. It's about creating shared meaning, building community, and shaping both our personal and collective identities. It's how we learn, grow, and connect as human beings. The most important stories of all are not those that hit the big screen or books on the New York Times top 10 list. The most important stories are those we tell ourselves about ourselves. The stories we are told and tell ourselves about who we are shape our identities. This becomes especially true when we experience trauma, which rewires our brains to prioritize fear responses. Our brains are powerful prediction machines, using past experiences to forecast future events and guiding our actions to align with those predictions. In the case of severe trauma, these responses often manifest as fight, flight, freeze, or submit, instinctive behaviors that our brains deploy to keep us safe, even when the threat is, as they say, all in our minds. Personal experiences and inherited narratives shape the stories that define us. Through our own lived experiences, we build unique narratives which intersect with the larger cultural and familial stories passed down to us. Culture makes a difference. Our struggles, achievements, and the messages we receive can either challenge or reinforce these internalized stories, prompting us to continually reshape and refine our sense of self. The stories we tell ourselves become the lens through which we see the world. Ultimately, the stories we absorb from various sources become the lens through which we view the world, shaping our identity by influencing our values, aspirations, and beliefs. It may seem as if these are mere suggestions from the brain, suggestions we can accept or reject, if only it were that simple. According to Bruce Perry's neurosequential model, when the brain's more primitive areas are activated, those impulses, fight, flight, freeze, or submit, dampen activity in our frontal cortex. In these moments, we're driven not by logic, but by a cascade of chemicals released into our bloodstream, which determine our reactions. Whether we fight or freeze, for instance, depends on a chemical response rather than a conscious choice. We are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. What we think of as courage or cowardice, then, may be more about biology than character. As we encounter and respond to events in life, our brains create stories about who we are, the world around us, and who we can or cannot trust. These stories form implicit maps that influence our choices and reactions, even outside of trauma. Yet we aren't bound to these stories forever. They can be reauthored, reimagined, and redefined. But before we can forge new identities for ourselves and our clients, let's please note and honor our current selves, even those, perhaps especially those of us, who feel wounded, abandoned, damaged, undesirable, or lacking. So I have one question for you, for now anyway. How did you survive to this point? And how has what you survived enabled you to survive until today? Let's honor who we are with a simple drawing exercise. Please take a piece of paper and draw a simple outline of a human body. It may not look like you, but it represents who you are and what you've been through. We all experience a range of emotions. Some are pleasant, others challenging, and some may feel neutral. Take a moment to choose colors that represent each of your emotions and use them to shade in the areas of your body where you feel these emotions most strongly. If you'd like, you can also create a color legend to show which color represents each emotion. While you're creating your image, please bring to mind someone who loves you unconditionally, someone who always has your back, anyone living or passed on. It can even be a special animal or an imaginary friend. It doesn't matter, as long as you can feel the love and kindness they hold for you, and imagine them looking over your shoulder as you create this image of yourself, imagining their love pouring into you as well as into the image. And imagine that love pouring into any part of your body that you may have issues with. Imagine what they might say to you should you be critical of yourself or of any part of your mind, body, or spirit. Imagine what you might say to a friend with a similar body type. Absorb that energy inside you and imagine how they may tell your story. And as you absorb this compassionate energy, please notice how it shifts your inner experience as you allow yourself to rest in this feeling of acceptance and warmth, as if their kindness is slowly reshaping the way you see yourself. This exercise is about inviting an outside perspective, one that sees you through a lens of unconditional love, into your own narrative. When we let go of self-criticism and welcome in this compassionate view, we can begin to see new possibilities for our story. And now, let's try a thought journal exercise. The goal here is to simply observe your thoughts and let them flow. No judgment, no pressure. Whether your mind is racing or you're feeling a bit stuck, we're going to spend a couple of minutes just writing down whatever comes up. If you find yourself thinking, I'm bored, this is silly, or I don't know what to write, that's totally okay. Those are thoughts too. Just jot them down. The idea is to capture whatever is there without editing yourself. So now, take out a piece of paper or a computer or a typewriter or whatever you have, and take a couple of minutes to write down whatever thoughts are coming to your mind. Don't worry about spelling, punctuation, or making it sound polished. Let your mind wander, and if you don't know what to write, write about that. Just allow the thoughts to flow. It can be anything from your to-do list to feelings about the day, or even random thoughts that pop up. Go ahead and start writing now. And some of us may even think in shapes and colors, or perhaps sounds. Feel free to use colored pencils and markers, or whatever is available to you for your thought journal. Please pause this video while you're writing and then restart once you're done. And now that you've written your thoughts down, let's take a moment to reflect on what you've written. Were there any thoughts that surprised you? Any that felt unexpected or out of place? Or maybe there were certain thoughts that seemed to show up over and over again. So let's take a moment to think about which of these thoughts you agreed with and which you might disagree with. Did you find yourself nodding along with certain ideas or rejecting others? Which ones felt true to you, and which felt like something you might want to challenge? And so now, let's dig even a little deeper. Where do you think these thoughts came from? Have you heard these thoughts before, either from yourself or from someone else? Is there a particular voice that echoes in your mind when you think certain things? Maybe it's the voice of a parent, a teacher, a friend, or even an influencer or an ad or commercial that you've encountered. Often, the voices we hear in our heads aren't even our own. They might be shaped by other people or by the messages we're constantly exposed to. Did you know that the average person is exposed to thousands of ads each and every day? Whether it's on TV, on social media, or even just walking down the street, we are constantly receiving messages trying to influence our thoughts, our desires, and even our self-worth. Ads tell us what we should want, how we should look, and even how we should think. Think about how often you've been presented with an ad that tells you that you're not enough unless you buy a product or service. That message, whether overt or subtle, has the power and potential to shape our thoughts and beliefs. Being aware of this is the first step to rebelling against these messages of not enough. So here's where we really start to take action. When you identify thoughts that you disagree with or that don't feel true to you, you have the power to challenge them. Ask yourself, is this thought mine? Is it based on fact? Or is it influenced by external forces like ads, social media, or the expectations of others? To begin challenging these thoughts, you can replace them with something more aligned to your own beliefs and values. For example, if an ad makes you feel insecure about your body, you could counter that thought with something like, "My body is strong and worthy just as it is." Or if you catch yourself thinking you should be somewhere in life other than where you are, remind yourself that everyone's journey is different, and it is okay to be right where you are right now. Please remember that thought journaling is about self-awareness. It's not about judging the thoughts that come up, but about noticing them, understanding where they might come from, and then deciding whether or not you wish to accept them. If you choose to continue practicing this, you'll build the ability to challenge unhelpful thoughts and replace them with more empowering ones. Take a few minutes now to jot down any final thoughts that came up during this reflection. And if you find yourself struggling with a thought or belief, write down one way you can challenge or reframe it. Thank you for taking the time to do this exercise today. I encourage you to keep practicing thought journaling, as it can be a powerful tool for self-discovery and growth. And this is the end of part 1.